to him if questions do come in on chat. So feel free to use that function, as you've all been doing really well so far this morning. So moving on, deface campaign signs of a Black City Council candidate, the desecration of the oldest Black church in the city, derogatory signs at 3 school properties referring to COVID-19 as the Chinese virus, the verbal assault of a city council member because of his Asian ethnicity. These messages of hate are among 18 that have been reported in the city in the past year, according to Human Relations Commission Chair, the Reverend Kaloma Smith. As a result of the rising verbal assaults and vandalism, the commission drafted a letter to the council seeking more proactive measures to fight racism in Palo Alto. The letter was part of a strategy the commission is taking to move the needle on what has been relative inertia in addressing racism and inequities. This letter was followed by a report to City Council on Black and Brown Palo Alto history and current experience of racism. The report recommended that the city partner with 100 local leaders to hold community circles about race and belonging. The HRC will provide discussion guides and training so that each volunteer host can engage 4 to 8 people in open and honest conversation. The conversations will take place between May 25th and June 19th. As the League of Palo Alto and sister leagues across the country focus their attention on diversity, equity, and inclusion, we are fortunate and honored today to have Pastor Kaloma Smith with us at our annual meeting to speak about the power of community. He will talk about hopes for the progress that can be made with all community organizations working together. Pastor Smith serves several roles in our community, both as chair of Human Relations Commission and as the dedicated pastor of the nearly 100-year-old University African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church in Palo Alto. In addition, he is active in other racial justice organizations and is a sought-after speaker. And now, please join me in a warm virtual welcome for Pastor Kaloma Smith.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you guys hear me clearly? Okay, well, I want to take some time today and really go into discussing what is the power of community. You know, I think oftentimes we get into discussions about equity and diversity, we get into discussions about policies and issues, and sometimes we don't ever go back to the fundamental foundational blocks of who we are and what we seek to be and how we can be better in those places. You know, community is something that I believe is best defined as a group of people living in one place, especially one practicing common ownership or a grouping of togetherness. One of the things I believe that we've lost in our country and we've lost in our world today is the sense of community. We have let other labels define us more than community. You know, I grew up in a place that had some significant partisan issues. I mean, they had some significant challenges. I mean, people would shout and scream at each other. In New York, if you were a Yankees fan, you know, you had to let the Mets know that they couldn't win. And if you were a Mets fan, you felt a little, like I am, you felt a little down, but you always stood for your Mets. I mean, we could spend hours and hours and hours arguing about the validity of baseball in New York. But you know what? We still each identified with our community. Because no matter who you were or what you were, and you started talking about the Red Sox or the Dodgers, they weren't from New York. They weren't from New York. Our community defined us, and it made, especially, you know, one of the interesting things that I remember growing up in community is remembering friends and families and walking down the street and everybody being together and us standing together. And right now, I feel that us as people in community, we don't do that. COVID-19 has exacerbated patterns that were in place before. Significant significant partisan politics, significant siloing, significant separation, inability to listen, inability to compromise. We have now become so siloed in our individual spaces because of COVID that we now live in our own echo chambers. You know, there isn't the free flowing of ideas and community. There isn't this idea of discussion and dialogue and back and forth. It's watch the channels we choose, go to the websites we choose, talk to our friends on the phone that we choose, and then we're just stuck in the same rut. The reality for many of us is that this isn't COVID, it didn't start this, it just accelerated it. Because over the past few years, whatever our political affiliation, we will read newspapers, we will watch TV, we will do things that support our view instead of having dialogue and discussion. Now, I want to talk to you, but I believe there's a power in community to push against these historic issues. And I believe there's some real significant power. So I want to give you three things to work that community does. The first thing is community identifies. Community empathizes, and community activates us. First point, community identifies, community empathizes, and the community activates us. So let me first talk about community identifies. You know, one of the things I love about the neighborhood, I live in Palo Alto, I live over by California Avenue by the train station, is this innate ability to just walk in my neighborhood and see people. I don't know their background, I don't know their exact history, but we've lived in this neighborhood for 5 years and we start recognizing people at Molly Stone's, or you start seeing parents from my son's daycare at Pierce Park, or sitting and eating dinner on California Avenue at one of the great restaurants, and I walk by and people wave, and I'm starting to see people because I'm building relationship with them. My relationship is not based on any exterior motive such as politics, work, job, school. My relationship is built on the closeness of physical proximity in the community and just people being cordial and nice. And that shared experience of us being together allows me to start identifying with people that I regularly would not. It would be a shame to live in communities that are full of a rich texture of people of different backgrounds and different thoughts, and we get so stuck in our own silos that we get in our car and leave our community to go be with people that agree with us. You know, I make it a habit now when I'm walking down Park Avenue. I say hi to everybody. I don't care what their background is. I don't care what their ethnicity is, because I identify and want to build relationships in the place that I'm living and the community that I have. You know, we oftentimes, and it's always interesting to me, is that people don't only identify community in Palo Alto when they start about development. It's never about people. If somebody wants to build something, that's when the people start saying, well, this is my community, but we never talk about community outside of development. We never talk about the richness of the people and the walks and the talks and the interesting things that happen in community. We don't talk about communities getting together and doing block parties, and we don't talk about community barbecues, and we don't talk about going to each other's kids' weddings and having community together in our physical space, which was in a 2-mile radius of our house. We don't do that. But that's where community starts. It starts with relationship, it starts with the shared experience, and it starts with that shared context of living. I will also say that some of our personal biases come into play when we see people that look different from us, when we see people from different backgrounds, when we see people that are different from us. Do we give them the same hi? Do we have the same willingness to start engaging in conversation and finding out about their life and being, or do we just want to identify with people that share similar backgrounds and have similar information that we do, or similar views that we do? Or are we willing to say community is the context and the people around us that we will identify with? I would encourage each of us as we continue to live in Palo Alto to start reaching to our neighbors and start walking around the block and start saying hi and start understanding that this is the place, that you're a place, and that you can identify with the people there. Community empathizes. You know, one of the challenges is when you live in community and you start having a relationship and you can start identifying and you start having shared experience and shared context, you will eventually hear sad stories. We will run into experiences that will challenge you, and you will hear about the hardship in people's lives. You know, one of my former one young lady that was a former commissioner on my commissioner talked about when she helped clean up for those that clean up the other day when they had issues around those that are in RV campers that have housing instability. And she talked about this beautiful story about a lady that was planting a garden hidden away in a small little plot because she wanted to grow fresh vegetables, and this is how she grew fresh vegetables. And she was talking about the empathy of somebody that is housing insecure but still wants nutritious food, and that balance. And now she can start empathizing with them. You know, one of the hallmarks of community is that community at its best is not defined by socioeconomic or educational boundaries, because it's a physical thing. It's those people that walk in your neighborhood, those people that are around you, those people physically see you. So it's the same people that will help the grandmother cross the street or bring the groceries up. It's the same that will check on seniors, that if they don't see them for a few days, want to make sure they're all right in the house. It's the same that will offer mothers and people in the community babysitting services. Those are the things that we can start seeing the humanity in the people around us, and we can start empathizing with them. I believe that without empathy, policy is hollow. It's charity, because you're not trying to help fellow humans. You're just trying to reinforce a political perspective. I've watched my views. I have watched my policy stances change over time because I live in community with people. I hear stories. I see experiences. I walk in the footsteps of others. You know, I grew up in a suburb of New York City called Mount Vernon, New York. My mom's a doctor, my dad's a banker. I went to private school, and for years, I had no significant interest in homelessness or no significant understanding of what it meant to be homeless. And then in my senior year of high school, I had the opportunity to do something called a midnight run. The midnight run took a group of high school students or volunteers from whatever organization, and we would make this super sweet hot chocolate in these large vats. And we would make these sandwiches and other things and bring blankets. And we would drive 45 minutes down to New York City, and then we would stop right on the west side onto the George Washington Bridge. And we pulled over, and I'm like, why are we here? Aren't we going out? And out of the right from underneath the George Washington Bridge, people started streaming out because they were living underneath the bridge. Then we drove further down, and we get down by Central Park West. And if anybody knows about New York City, Central Park West is probably one of the most expensive areas to live in the city. And we pulled up right beside Central Park, and people started streaming out of the park. And what that did for me at 18 or 19 was made me realize that there are people that are living in the city, in the place that I live, wherever it is, that are living in horrible conditions, and my eyes were just not attuned to their suffering. It's opened my eyes now that anytime I go to a major city, anytime I walk in my town, I start looking at parks and I start seeing tents and things. And I know that somebody is suffering. So it gives me empathy. Another thing was, as a young minister, one of the tasks that they used to charge us with was doing Thanksgiving dinners for seniors. We in our city, we used to give out we used to give out 500 dinners to seniors. Like drive around. I used to get about 200 young adults, and we used to drive and give them. And we drove, and one time I came back, and one of my young adults came out of an apartment, and she was crying. She goes, Kaloma, I went in this apartment, and it was roach infested. And the food was rotten in the fridge. And the lady doesn't even know that it's like that because she's blind. She's just sitting there, and our healthcare worker is abusing her. We called the necessary authorities, public safety, all of that, reported elder abuse. But this is what community does. If I'm in community, it puts me in the position to start empathizing with people. Because when I live in community, it forces me to actually step out and engage with the people that are in physical proximity of me. The last thing that community forces us to do is activate. We as a community are not just here not to sit there and watch and say, oh, that's bad, that's great, let me go back to my life. I believe as human beings, C.S. Lewis, Christian apologetic, identified in his book, one of his books, he said, all human beings have a numinous. It's almost the thing that they sense what's good or bad. That's why in certain culture, in all cultures, murder is bad. Lying is bad. Doesn't matter what faith or background. There are certain things that we as all humans know are bad. And when we live in community and we see things that are bad, the numinous, our internal clock should compel us on some level to start addressing it. Doesn't matter what our faith is, doesn't matter if we're agnostic, if we're just human. Now, I can't tell you what level of engagement, there are things that I used to volunteer for. Now I'm just not going to volunteer for now. I'm in a different phase of life. I'm not loading a warehouse. I'm not throwing my back out. When my back goes out, it goes out for like 5 days. And then I got to lay in the bed and I'm sore, I'm hurt. But I advocate in different ways, and I'll deliver food and I'll do different things. We each have a different role, but it's important for us to activate for something for someone else in our community. One of the things as we started talking about race and diversity and the other challenges in our city, and we started tapping people to be discussion leaders, we felt like this was a way that people can activate in their community to start having honest dialogue about ethnicity, about race. The interesting thing about this is that it's among peers. We are trying to get people to talk with their friends about how they honestly feel or where they're at. Well, some people be like, I don't get, and this is all right. Not everybody's going to get everything, but some people be like, I don't understand all of this. I hear it on the news. I have different inputs. I don't get it. So they might come to the conversation in that way. But we want them to be with their friends so they can have an honest discussion. So they're not just sitting back, listening, going, it's not for me. So we're trying to really create space where people can identify and activate and start having real and powerful and profound conversations in their peer groups. The reason I believe that that is so critical, because I could preach the best sermon, we could pass the best policy, but if the heart is not right. If conversation, if that doesn't start changing, then it's pointless. You know, many historians have many opinions about the United States Civil War, but one of the significant failures of the United States Civil War was the fact that it never dealt with the heart and policies of those in the Southeast. And that's why we got to see the continuation of things like Jim Crow. That's why we saw the Daughters of the Confederacy build statues to hail heroes that lost, hail so-called heroes that lost a war to separate from the country. That's why these conversations are so important. You know, some people will push back and not another conversation. Well, we need to start working on our hearts and minds of people, because in order for us to become a more just society, it requires not everyone, but the majority of people to start pushing for a more just world. There's such a powerful thing in community, and you are the community. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Pastor Smith. We do have one question. Actually, it's a several-part question, if you still have time.
I'm here for you.
You're here for us? Great. This is from Alice, and it's how would you advocate for the greater community in Arizona, Texas, Georgia, Iowa, North Carolina, where the elected officials do not care about their community and deny their basic rights to voters?
So pay for the lawyers. Pay for the lawyers. I'm dead serious. At the end of the day, you know, prayerfully, we still have courts that work. And, you know, for example, I donate to the NAACP and some other legal funds every week, every month, because you are right, they're not listening. So we got to take them to court.
I think your answer would be the same for another part of the question, but I'm going to go ahead and put it out there. With your skills, how would you shock Clarence Thomas into empathy? I am bewildered by these so-called leaders.
So again, so there, let me say this. It becomes incumbent on us, particularly those in Democratic precincts of California, where we have supermajorities and we run up the score every time we put up a candidate in our own area for whatever reason, to start looking at ways to engage other campaigns nationally that we can really push behind. A lot of my focus, particularly on national issues, is finding the right partners and supporting them, whether it is through social media presence, funding, XYZ, because what we have to do is use our influence, resources, and our voice to amplify those other voices. I mean, we saw this in Georgia in the special runoff, where people were able to amplify the voices of Senator Warnock, Senator Ossoff, as they were going for the recall. And we need that kind of energy on a national level, because there are local forces that are not there for the good of people. So I think we use our voices and our energy in that space. I think there is also a danger that it's easy for many of us to get caught up in the national, that we miss the local.
Interesting thought.
You know, I spent my first 4 or 5 years here very, very engaged in what was happening nationally. And then when I started peeling back the onion and looking at our local policies and politics, there's a lot of opportunity for us to do some really profoundly good work in our city, in our county, and in our state, and advocate around certain issues. I've got a ton of issues I personally am advocating for at this point, but you know, you still run out of time actually too. But I would encourage you to really start looking at the local politics. I know that we have several present, former, and future council members on this call and commission leaders. And what I have noticed is that oftentimes when we're faced with issues, we have a lot of the same people that call in and try to sway the issue their way, and other voices don't participate. So it's incumbent, as the room is listening and as the room is hearing, it's only hearing from a specific group. So it's incumbent on us to engage in local policies on an active level.
This question kind of continues on what you're just saying. From Karen Kolinsky, you talked about neighborhood community. How can local organizations find common meeting ground to identify, emphasize, and activate?
I think it's incumbent on leadership to start reaching out and finding natural places to work with other organizations and start seeing where they can work together. I think it's incumbent on them, on us, to build those relationships before something happens, because I have a matrix that I teach as far as community advocacy, and it's 4 steps. The first step is sponsorship. So people will fund things in local communities. That's a sponsor. The second is a mentor, where they'll give some money and some expertise. The third is an ally that allows people to say, I'm allying around an issue. And then at the top level is partnership, where people have walked together for a long time, that they are working with the person, not with the issue. And I think it becomes important for leaders and those that are involved in organizations to start looking for opportunity to ally and partner with other organizations, not just sponsor and mentor. Is that helpful?
Yes, I think so. I'm looking to see if there's any more. There's things
No,
that we talked about in the chat.
Liz has her.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, Liz. Go
Liz
ahead.
has her hand up.
Liz,
Unmute, Liz.
you're still on mute. You need to unmute. There you go.
Hey, did you say me? This
Yes.
Liz?
Yes.
First of all, I want to thank you, Pastor, for being here, but also for the incredible amount of time and energy you put into the community through the Human Relations Commission. Would you talk a little about the HRC? That's an important aspect of what we do in the community, and also maybe that's the beginning of your sponsorship, mentoring, and so forth. So I'd just like to hear a little more about that.
So the Human Relations Commission for Palo Alto is, I like to phrase it, it's the canary in the coal mine. We as a commission are actively looking at the issues that impact the human and living experiences of those in Palo Alto. Over the past, I've been on it, I think it's 4 years at this point, we expand the issue from LGBTQ and LGBTQ plus relationships and rights in our community, and making sure we have the right support services. We've done seniors and aging, we've done police reform, we've done the lived experience of Black and white in the community. We've also done advocacy around women with SIDA. We as a commission are really out there looking and working at the human issues of our city. Our major focuses this year are first around diversity and inclusion, hate crimes, and then health and well-being, and mental health and well-being, because we believe as we come out of the pandemic and as the economy shifts and as things go around, there are going to be significant mental health, physical health, community health challenges, and we want to make sure that there's significant well-being. HRC functions in several different ways in the communities, through events, through policy, working group, and sending stuff to city council for recommendations, and going that way. So hopefully that gives everybody a good overview of the HRC.
Anyone else want to jump in with a question for Pastor Smith? Lots of comments in the chat. I don't know if Pastor Smith, have you been able to see them, of thank you so much for your words of inspiration and for being with us today and for the work that you do in the city and on the commission and the whole community.
Chris asked me, what are my 2 focus areas?
Oh, yes, Chris, yeah, I see that.
So my 2 focus areas is police transparency and diversity and inclusion. I can dive really deep. Well, first of all, diversity and inclusion, we're doing 100 conversations, which we're looking for hosts. I think we've got 30 or 40, maybe 45 hosts at this point. If somebody can just put the link to that in the chat, we're looking for it. Basically, we will train you to have a conversation with your peers. We're asking that you have a conversation between the 25th of May and June 19th. It should be a rich and robust experience. We're trying to get 100 community leaders to engage. We've got a few of the members of city council, we've got the mayor, and we've also got the city manager engaged. It includes PAUSD, the library, the art center. We've got probably, I think it's 11 or 12 different organizations that are engaged in this. So we ask that you would consider being a group leader. And so there's the diversity and inclusion piece. The second is police reform, particularly around transparency. You know, my firm belief is this. You don't correct instances, you address patterns. And having lived in Palo Alto for the last 8 years and seeing some of the patterns, I don't believe we have enough transparency from the police department. And oftentimes the explanation of policy is very protective of the police officers and not accountable to the public. You know, part of protecting and serving is also creating an environment where the people that are being protected have a clear understanding of how and what they're being protected from and what happens, because it gives a sense of dis-ease if we continually get surprised by lawsuits like we did the other day. You know, the city just released their study on community and engagement and different things. And one of the things that they saw was in our community, there is a downward trajectory in the trust of our police department. So I think transparency is critical. So those are my 2 issues.
Okay, if everyone could just check your chat, there's a few links there that are for the 100 conversations. So if you want to participate, also Ellen Smith has signed up to lead one of the conversations. So let her know, and she's put her email in the chat as well. And we just want to, you know, we're right on time. And Pastor Smith, we just want to thank you. There have been many comments about how grateful we are to have you share your thoughts with us this morning in our annual meeting. And I've got one hand, Dan has a hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to do a plug for the fact we have now in our local league an equal justice committee. And we are supporting the 100 conversations, trying to gather leaguers to participate as hosts or participants. And, you know, and we're in a planning phase, looking at broad issues that hopefully piggyback along what the Human Relations Commission is going to be doing this year. And please, if you're interested in joining the committee, just to let us know.
Okay, Nancy, I think we'll turn everything back to you.
Well, thank you, Myra. This is just another example of awesome guest speakers that dove right into the midst of what the league is really passionate about. And thank you very much, Reverend Smith. I I want to chime in with everything you've said. I think community has a power
Mhm.
that we need to remember that we're a community. And I think we've lost some of that remembrance and transactional experiences that we would rather have. So we're going to, but Palo Alto deserves to have a great community. And thank you for the work you're doing in HRC. And Valerie Stringer is on this, is at this meeting, and she has been on your commission for years and is rolling off this year. So
yes, you're good to go. Can I say one thing? Valerie Stinger has absolutely done a spectacular job on the HRC in the last 6 years. She has created significant change and momentum in our community. And if it was not for her engagement and involvement, I would not be on the HRC. And and you talk about community. Her house is around the corner from the church, and she walked around and came to an event at the church and met me and stayed engaged. And that's why I became more engaged in the city. So I'm grateful for Valerie Stinger and how she does community.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Thank you.